Hi everyone, welcome to this new edition of this podcast, Show Me the Magic. Show Me the Magic is all about showing you products that I think are worth showcasing here on the podcast. And my guest today is Chris Priebe, the CEO, and I read co-founder on your LinkedIn of Zelt. But from what I understood from from an interview I watched earlier today that you gave last year to someone, you were actually a solo founder of Zelt. So just give me a bit about the journey, how you came to the idea, your journey before that, which was more in finance, VC, P and VC, and how you started the company, and are you a co-founder or a founder? Maybe we'll find out.
Yeah, it's a bit of both. So I started the company technically on my own, but my wife joined me. I think it was like maybe 9 to 12 months in, and yeah, so she's dealing with the product part of the business, and I'm dealing mostly with the commercial part of the business, so sales, marketing, and all the other fun administrative stuff, finance, legal, etc. So. Yeah, co-founder now, and I would say initially the first nine months or a year or so I was on my own.
Yes, and before that, as I said, you were in the VC world. Am I right?
Yeah, I spent a couple of years in venture investing at a fund called GFC. Before that, I was also a little bit longer, three years or so in private equity, so buying out technology companies.
Hmm. And you were the GM for the branch of a company co-founded by Oliver Samwer. I heard in this
Uh,
interview.
Yeah, somewhat. So GFC is a venture fund, so it's a GP-LP structure, right?
Hmm.
So billion-dollar fund, bunch of investors giving the VC GP the money basically to invest from. And I was one of the directors of the, let's say, the entity that is technically, managing the GP, and was on the investment committee there with Oli Samber.
And how was the switch from being in the investment world to going to the other side, I would say, and becoming a founder?
It's much harder.
It's the
Yeah,
real deal.
yeah, it's way harder, right? Obviously, your scope changes all the time. The moment you kind of learn something and figure something out, you have to hire somebody to do it for you. You have to move on, right? So in a way, you actually never have the time to kind of get in the flow. While as an investor, it's kind of you rinse and repeat, right? You kind of build your reputation and you get known for something, and you kind of have your thing and you kind of just run with it. While as a founder, right, if you grow, like the company changes all the time. Whatever worked a year ago is not relevant anymore now. So. Yeah, it's very different. It's
And
very different.
also you don't have a portfolio strategy. You put all your eggs in your own basket, and so you've got to make it happen. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's quite different. And so you started as a solo founder, building the product that we will see later. It was probably not the same when it was an MVP, but with contractors, not even with a team of employees. There was a strategy in the beginning to work with contractors.
The reality is, it's very hard to get somebody to leave that job when you
Uh-huh.
have nothing. uh, and so I think the reality is, it's actually much easier to start working with contractors, because that's just kind of, they're used to the fact that they work on a project for some time, they move around. Actually, they kind of like it. While employees, right, they want to see the long-term vision and the funding and there's traction, and they want to see career progression. Obviously, when you have nothing to show, that is very tricky. So I think you can get started much quicker with contractors, and then you can, once you have something to show, maybe a few first customers, maybe raise them some funding. It's much easier to get people to join you full time.
And how was the switch also in terms of organization and product management, product creation between the team of contractors and when you started having your own employees and that to take over the job done by the contractors? Was it a smooth transition?
Yeah, actually, they work the same. It's just the way that basically, payment and the legal structure, like, it's technically just a different contract, and you don't run it through payroll, but it's the same thing. So yeah, some people actually that I would consider employees were actually also contractors, given they were in different countries. Uh, so the line between a contractor and an employee are pretty blurry these days, and some of these actually later on moved to the UK and became actual employees with us. So yeah, it's very hard to say actually what's the difference. But I think long term, I think you want to work with employees because there is, I would say, mentality wise, there's a pretty big difference like in terms of time horizons. There's a pretty big difference. Like contractors prefer moving on, while employees tend to prefer like growing and staying. So we found it more sustainable to build a team with full-time employees, sort of folks that prefer that kind of relationship with an employer. It's more of a mindset thing than a contractor or like legal employment thing. I think investors are very kind of, I would say, simplistic. Maybe sometimes the way of thinking is like, oh, it has to be employees or employee record or contractors. I don't care. What matters is like your mentality and what you care about and the way you think about the future. Whether you're then on a contract or employment contract, like I don't really care.
And you said also in this interview that you were tech-minded, very tech-aware, but not a coder yourself. So you were not coding the product, not even the first version of the product. So you had an experience as a product leader to lead the team, or did you also need someone to actually transform your vision into the product specs?
No, so I was the product owner. I probably still am the product owner together with Polina today. I think nobody really has a full vision of the entire product besides myself and Polina, and I think that's just natural, right? So I think as a founder, you naturally are the product owner, and design is another thing. I think the MVP was pretty ugly and not well designed, but it worked, so it did the things that it need to do. So yeah, no, definitely product was easy for me, and I think natural. I think it has to come natural to you as a founder. But then the design part is something that I'm very glad that somebody joined us that actually has done this professionally, because it's not easy and takes a lot of time.
And why did you choose the people scene versus all the other ones that you could have picked in the B2B arena?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't pick a scene at all. I picked, let's say, I'm really more like an engineering type of person, so I picked the problem, not so much, I want to necessarily sell in the HR space. But it's more like a systems problem. Like there's a lot of scattered data in this world, in lots of different parts of industries and horizontals and verticals, but certainly in this one. So it's an industry that I had experience with as an investor and I had some understanding of. So just understood the problem there. And I think that's always what people say, right? You think the first-time founders always think about the product and the problem, and then later they realize, oh, I need to do marketing and sales. And founders think the other way around, because right now we're in the stage where we have a great product, and we're now scaling on the marketing sales side, which is a completely different challenge than the solving the problem in the product.
You also said, but that's why I was talking about the scene, that you had this impression. I mean, it was just the reality that the revenue part of the B2B space was more crowded, also with players which were older than in the HR tech, and so there were people active in this field, but less. So it was a bit less crowded. How has been the evolution since you started Zelt in the scene where you are? So in the HR tech, have you seen an increasing amount of competition very fast?
Not really. I mean, it's probably one of the most mature, if not the most mature software market in the world. It has always been very crowded, so that hasn't really changed. I think there's new verticals, or let's say new subsegments that have came into existence, like EOR, which also came then with a lot of, let's say, new venture funding that otherwise maybe wouldn't have gotten into this market. And these guys are now also building, general HR products, which creates some competition. But I would say otherwise, it's a market that actually, doesn't get that much investment, because it seems mature and crowded and not much exciting going on there. So yeah, it's a bit of I would say an antithesis to build and execute in this market, just because it's been around for so long, and frankly companies are still using stuff from like 15 years ago, and it moves pretty slowly. So the upside is it's huge. So it's very different to like some new AI tool, right, where it's totally greenfield and you can sell like these agents to an individual. Like it's a very different world in this market.
'Cause I had a look just before we started this call on the foundation years of, let's say, for instance, the accounting software that we know, like things like Xero, 2006, QuickBooks even much earlier in 1983, QuickBooks, the first version. Then if we take the CRM, we have HubSpot in 2006. We have Pipedrive in 2010, Salesforce, the old guys, in 1999. But if we have a look at the I would say the multi-product HR players like Rippling, iBob, Personio, Deal, and you, it's all after 2015. All of them started after 2015. So that's why I was asking that maybe the competition has been accelerating over the last 10 years in this specific part of the B2B space. Am I right about it?
Not really. I mean, Hybo, for example, doesn't compete, or Persony doesn't compete with Workday, right? It's just new markets that developed. So, Workday sells in large enterprises, for example. SMB just wasn't a market that really was attractive 10, 15 years ago. So businesses that were built in that space, like Salesforce or Workday, they're not selling to SMB or mid-sized. So that changed in 2015 with SaaS, right? So before 2015, you didn't have SaaS. Therefore, software was not accessible to SMBs because they couldn't afford to get a guy like, putting the hardware into the rack and stitching it up, right? And figuring out the cooling and the electricity and the patching. That only became available in the mid-teens, which is when new companies were founded. But they focused on new markets, right? So they weren't really going out there saying, hey, we're going to now take away business from Workday. That didn't, probably some exceptions, but that didn't really happen. And again, the other way around, Workday isn't really competing in their markets either. It's just new markets basically exist, which is why the software market overall is still growing. Because not only are people spending more, but also there's more companies that are now, let's say, accessible, or where software makes sense or is accessible. And that's still happening, right? If you look in, I don't know, in Africa or maybe some parts of Asia, there's probably lower adoption in certain B2B software that isn't maybe that has been used for a long time here. So in a way, there's still new markets developing in other regions, and then new developments like EOR, for example, because the way we work changes. So there's always new markets that start to exist. So there's more vendors, but they're not all competing with each other.
But you've also had quite a few very horizontal ERP vendors, which are integrating a lot of the pieces, a lot of the modules, including the HR module, but which were not pure players in the HR space. For instance, I'm thinking about, because I know them very well, the Belgian company Odoo, for instance, the ERP Odoo, the open source ERP. They also have an enterprise version. They have HR modules, but you wouldn't say that they're the best in class in that space, but it's part of the suite. They have all of those modules, and you have that. That's also part. You've got some kind of HR in NetSuite, in SAP, in all those super horizontal platforms. But then you've seen some kind of specialization of pure players in a way, like you, who are doing best in class in their space. But do you see also yourself integrating with the super horizontal ERPs? Like, do you come to some deals where you will have potential integration with NetSuite or SAP or people like that? Is something that you see?
Yeah, absolutely. And those integrations are typically actually quite easy, ironically, because actually, the ERP or accounting system is typically built around transactions, or if you think of Oracle, SAP, maybe inventory and like factories, and like they're called enterprise resource planning, right? So it's literally resources. And when you look at when companies like Oracle, SAP were created, they're all manufacturing companies. Like SAP, German company, the German economy is built on manufacturing. So that was really about managing manufacturing, really. Of course, if you now look at companies today, of course, they're still manufacturing, right? But a much bigger part of the economy now is digital businesses, where there's no manufacturing, there's no trucks, there is no logistics, especially just people doing stuff on computers, right? That means, in a way, the relevance of the traditional ERP system kind of diminishes in this part of the world. And really the new type of ERP system is actually a human resources planning system, or an HCM or HR or whatever you want to call it. But of course, there's the companies that kind of still produce and they have actual resources or shifts or stuff that they have to manage besides people. They will need an ERP, and then the question is, okay, how do you kind of combine these things? You could either have, let's say, an ERP and Zelt and integrate it, or as you mentioned, of course, the ERP guys also then added their own HR offerings, and it could make sense, but maybe some are better than others. But it depends on the company, right? I think if you are a non-manufacturing company, would you buy the Oracle HCM or the SAP SuccessFactors? You
So
can.
yeah, so you
Maybe
can, yeah. So that's an interesting point. You can, in a way, these days, be the entry point into the ERP world. In a way, I mean, people could start their journey with, let's say, Zelt and obviously some accounting software for the books, but you could be the de facto first entry into organizing your operations. When you are infrastructure light and people heavy, service heavy in a way.
Yeah, if your main asset in the company, if literally you look at your balance sheet and you have basically a bunch of cash and like liabilities and invoices and that's it, and then you have a lot of, let's say in your P&L you see a lot of like salary, for example, then your main resource is people, and your main system for that will be a more like HR type system like ours. If you have mines or big factories, right, then probably it's the traditional ERP first. And there's overlap, of course, but it is different. It's a very different system, and the core of the database is very different because for us the core entity in the database is an employee. If you look at the core entity of an ERP, there's probably employees in there, but it's more about transactions and resources, and I guess there also depends on the vertical, right? If you're in mining, maybe it's something different than maybe in logistics. In the ERP, you also see a lot of verticalized kind of specialized players, right? Because ERP in one industry is very different to ERP in a different industry. That's slightly different HR. It's a bit more, I'd say, a bit more horizontal, but again with exceptions. So you already see, it's too simplistic to say, hey, there's Oracle and SAP, and these are kind of dominating. Actually, there's hundreds of vendors out there, and they're all like there are many of them successful in their own way, in their own little fragment of the market, which could be a combination of size, region, industry. Regulations, right? If you're in fintech or financial industries, maybe it's different to maybe legal or not regulated. So yeah, it's a huge market, and so you need to just pick, where do you want to play, because your product for that thing will look different than if you picked a different spot on the field.
Yeah, we'll come back to that later, because I would like also to ask you some question about how you see modular versus composable and things like that. But we'll do that after we dive into the demo. So I don't know if you have prepared any specific demo for the product, but I think it would be interesting to show the different product lines inside of Zelt. So how you approach the onboarding, how you approach also device management, which is a part of what you do. So the different parts of the product. I don't know where you want to start. Okay, so first screen we have. What is it? Is it the welcome screen?
This is the dashboard. So, similar to when you log into, let's say, Microsoft 365, right? There's usually some kind of dashboard. Obviously, there's a lot of different apps and functionalities in there. So when you log in, like on the regular login screen, obviously, you can't go directly into a specific app. So there's, let's say, a routing place, right? So you can see here, they're similar to iCloud. I don't know if you've ever logged into iCloud on your browser, but it kind of looks like this, basically. You have these widgets, and widgets belong to apps. So these apps are kind of residing here within the side menu, and you can kind of configure it. So, you can remove widgets, you can add them to here, you can make them bigger or smaller, or, move them around depending on where you want to have them. So say I want to have my calendar big and this small, I can just do that, and then it looks different. Benefit is it's configurable and it's extendable. So we can just add more widgets when people say, hey, I would love to see my device security overview here, and then we can add it, and you can just, it's more available. and it's flexible. So, if, for example, here, let's say I track timesheets or I have to clock in, clock out. So I can add it here to my dashboard. If you don't clock your hours, it's probably not that relevant. You can just remove it.
That's already a very interesting way of crafting this dashboard, the welcome screen. As you said, it reminds us of iCloud. It has a native feel, I would say, even if it's in the browser. When you clicked on Edit Dashboard, the way that you had the overlay there, yeah, it looks a bit like if you had a native screen, if you know what I mean.
Like in the phone, yeah? Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, or like a Mac native app in a way, but inside of a
Yeah.
browser, which looks pretty cool. Nice.
Yeah, so this is built in React. So it's not native, but obviously you have a lot of control how you want it to look. But a lot of people are using iPhones, right? So you're used to, let's say, these common notions of how I think things move and look. So we try to emulate things that people are already used to, so they don't have to learn a lot of new things, right? And we try to basically hook on those things that people already like and have learned. So that, there's a lot of functionality in here. Ideally, we want to have people learn as little new stuff as possible so they can focus on finding where they need to. Because let's face it, an HR system is not your main productivity tool. It's not Slack. It's not your email. So you need to find things quickly in here and not spend a lot of time, browsing around.
Yeah, maybe another question about the way you usually would design a screen with your wife, apparently, because she's the head of product. Do you first decide, okay, we want to show all these things, then we will cut and remove what needs to remove to make this screen as simple as possible, and maybe have a second screen or a sidebar or something else like a model if you want to go deeper? What is your philosophy in terms of designing the views?
I think it's actually a really tricky topic, right? Because there's oftentimes not an obvious answer. So, for example, when I go here, so first of all, we have a mobile app, right? So we need to always keep in mind whatever we do on the browser. And yes, there's a lot of space here. So in theory, you can fit all this stuff on a page. It will not fit onto the mobile screen. And whatever you do in here needs to be easily transferable to the mobile app, even just from a UX perspective, right? So let's say I have a user, I've learned how this works in Zelt. I now use the mobile app. I shouldn't have to relearn the whole thing from scratch to figure out how it works. It should kind of be similar. And so, for example, you can see on this page here, we have these sections, right? So we have, for example, basic here, we have details. And we left a lot of white space on the right-hand side. In theory, we could use this space, but on a mobile app, you couldn't. So we decided basically, hey, this thing here, it doesn't look exactly the same on a mobile app, but it's a very similar concept. We have these sections, and you can scroll on it, and this is easily transferable to the mobile app. If you look at the drawer here, for example, where it comes out like this, on the mobile app, it'll just come up from the bottom because that's the native iOS thing. But it kind of works the same way. So we're trying to align, how the web version works with the mobile version. That also comes with challenges. So, sometimes, for example, on this page here, we have an offboarding page. So here we decided to maybe actually go a bit too minimal. So you can see here, you're offboarding a person, and these are, let's say, all the major big blocks of tasks they need to do. But here, for example, you can see there's something I still have to do. I need to review some accrued balance. I can't actually see what it is. I have to click on here to get there. Similar to maybe in the onboarding task here, when I go to, I think maybe I have somebody else here, I still need to remove access to an app. It says you have there's still one left, but I need to click in it to see what it is. I think this one here, I think I changed my mind on this. I think here we'll actually go back and we'll actually remove all these extra tabs, and we move this and these things here back to the main page, because sometimes it can be better to put more for the benefit of having on a single page, and sometimes it's better not to do that, and it's not always entirely clear why one is A and the other one is B, right? So it's
and also on desktop you have the benefit that you can have a full tabular view. Usually you would go to a card view on mobile because you can't really have like a lateral scrolling as in a table. So it depends also on the device. There are things that you can show in a different way on a card than in a table. I would say so. It depends. Depends on where you show it. You have more screen estate on the desktop, so there you could have you could have some other stuff. I would say maybe the way I see it is that if it's self-explaining and it doesn't clutter the interface and it's easier for the user to have it on the same screen, then you couldn't put it on the same screen. But if it's a friction point and it clutters, and then it should be on another screen. I would say that would be the way I would see it, but just my
Yeah,
opinion.
in the end, only the user knows. So, right, in the end,
Yeah.
you have some preconceived notion of how you think how it works, and probably you will have some intuition based on your own. But the reality is, if you ask 10 people, whatever they say kind of works best, right? And
Do you do a lot of user testing or heat maps and stuff like that to see if
not
people get
really.
it? No.
No, I think it's not needed. I think you use intuition, and then 70% of the time or 80% it's correct, and then the 20% of time where you were wrong, you just change it.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think it's all user testing. I think it's a lot of waste of time. Like you can just try it and ask people, and they will tell you.
Yeah. Then you see if a screen doesn't really convert the way you want, you just look at the stats and then you get it. Yeah. What are you using for your user focused stats? Are you using something like PostHog or something like that?
I think we use Clarity, Microsoft Clarity. Yeah.
Cool.
Which has, I think they have so they have heat maps, and we use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, people just tell you. When we speak to people, say, "Hey, how do you like this new feature?" They'll tell us, "Oh, I think too many clicks needed." Too many clicks usually means it's nested rather than on the same page, or it's in the wrong place. But no. And then so the menu structure here is all, let's say, aligned with our modules. So we have a modular pricing module, we have a growth module, and a manual module, etc. So that's all aligned. So it's very easy to understand how our pricing works. We have a core module that gives you access to basically all of our customers have the same side menu, and that's important because otherwise, if you don't see it in the menu, how do you know that exists? And we don't want to have just a placeholder like a marketing page. I don't really like these. So each of these functionality has free functionality included in our core module. Core module is mandatory. So that's the minimum you can be on. And then in each of these modules, you have certain functionality that's included. So for example, here in surveys, right, you can run a survey and it's nice. You can have analytics and you can make it anonymous and you have heat maps and all that cool stuff. But on the core module, you get up to 3 surveys included. And if you want more, basically, then you have to upgrade. So it's kind of product-led growth or product-led expansion. Reality is in our market, PLG doesn't really work for the initial buy. It's a very classic enterprise kind of sales-led approach, and I think that's never going to change. But then once people are on the platform, this works really well. So they can explore stuff, they can try things out, and then some people just really like a particular thing, and then they upgrade and they buy the module. Maybe 6 months later or something like that.
And so let's dive maybe into the different parts of the product, the different modules. So we have the people, the time, the growth, the money, tech, and reports. Could you just, in a few minutes, just show us around the different options in the menu?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, this is an all-in-one platform for employee management or HR management, what do you want to call it? But basically, the idea is that whatever concerns your employees from a B2B management process perspective, you should be able to do it in Zelt. Obviously, we haven't built all the product sets that we want, but that's kind of the vision. And of course, we're building more and more over time to fill all the different puzzle pieces. That also means you will find dedicated vendors that do only one thing in the menu. So you will find some apps, and this may be an extreme, but there are some apps that do nothing but an org chart, right? And maybe they have the best functionality and all kinds of fancy stuff in there. But obviously, this is just one little feature in the app, right? And there's some simple functionality that you need, and you can search people, and you can filter it, and that kind of stuff. Similar to maybe, this is the people modules. Yeah, at the core is the directory. Directory feeds basically all the other apps in the system. So this is really the core of the system. You have the employee record. It's broken down by sections. You can create custom sections. Everything is, maybe this one's not a good record. Let me go here. Everything is a table with its own permissions, its own APIs. So you can granularly permission the system. Everything is driven by effective dates, so you can change stuff in the future. You have a history of past changes. So for example, I can give you a compensation record looking forward 3 months time. That already takes effect. Any changes are already scheduled to take effect in the future. So, that's really important for bigger companies where things happen asynchronously. From here, you have a separate menu for onboarding, offboarding. You can define your workflows here. So for example, Cecilia, you can see has a different onboarding flow than, for example, Frank, because there's a different template. And here you can automate things like collecting employee information, creating apps in different systems. For here, I've only selected Microsoft, but we have like 30 different apps that you can connect and do this for. You can send out contracts. You can assign hardware and devices, laptops, phones, etc. You have an asset register in here. Then you can collect documents, onboard them to payroll. This is for getting signatures for contracts. You can auto-create contracts as well. Anything that can't be automated, you can put in a checklist. You can do things like background checks in the system, right of work checks. These are kind of compliance requirements. So basically, you can structure your workflow and then automate as many of these things as possible. This basically saves a lot of time. You can do this like in 5 minutes, while otherwise it could take you 2 hours to onboard an employee.
And so on the other side, there is a kind of a portal view for the employee to take action on some of those points, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So there's kind of a mirrored view of this list here. Obviously, I'm an admin, so I can see all kinds of things here. Yeah. They all see all the things that they have to do. The formatting is slightly different. So here, for example, it says, it has to upload documents. It doesn't show you which documents these are, except I can see them here on the employee record. In the user-facing version of this, it will say upload your passport and upload your driver's license or whatever, and then you click on the button, you take a photo from your app, and then it's done.
It's a guided workflow, for them. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Documents. So these are kind of basic core HR functionality. So I have like your documents here. You can, people upload automatically when you onboard them. You can automatically create documents. So let's say you want to create an employment contract here. You can set up your templates in Zelt and then automatically send it out. This, it just auto-populates. And
you do all the signing part also, all the exchange of signatures.
Yeah, exactly. So you can just send it to somebody, and this one here, for example, is already signed. I already signed it here. And then when Adriana logs in, so first of all, she gets an email, but when she logs in, she will just see here an action item. Please sign the document. You can click on it. You can see the documents. You can sign it, and then it's done.
Okay.
Then you hear the time map. So this is everything for like managing people's time. So you have a calendar and you can filter it. You can put it into your calendar app on your phone or Google. We have all kinds of holiday calendars around the world. Then absence is your leave management. So when are people off? These are all your requests. You have all your balances. So there's, let's say, the bank account balance of people's holiday balance. And let's say maybe my work from home balance. So you can set up your different policies, membership rules, approval rules, etc. But then it all comes down to, let's say, here your balance, and you can see that all here. In the team view, managers can see just basically its filtered view for your direct reports, and this is available in the entire app. So I can see here, for example, the balances of people in my team. If I want to go here into growth and I want to see people that report into me, right, I can go into the team view, and then basically I can see all the results of people that reported into me. So you can easily make information accessible, not just to admins, but also other people in the company that have partial visibility rights, in particular people that report into them directly or indirectly. This is for timesheets here. So you can set up different working patterns. So I have 4 different working patterns here where actually timesheets are required. I have a lot of more time working patterns in here. They will just not show up here. So these people are basically expected to track the hours here. You can see this week I haven't really put anything in here yet, but maybe check last month. So you can see, for example, Anastasia logged 39 hours last month. So you can plan your rota and people track time against it. And you can then automatically process payroll based on these numbers. You can set up your overtime rules and stuff like that. And that all flows through automatically from the timesheets. You can just log your timesheets here. You can click on it. You can edit it, and then this is already pre-populated with what you plan to work. But then if you work longer, you can just update it here. Maybe leave a note. had to stay a bit longer. And then it goes through an approval flow. If it's approved, it'll just go through payroll automatically.
So for logging the timesheet, they do it only, I would say, via the app, or do you have something like, I don't know, Chrome extension or some other ways to do it? Maybe the mobile app also?
Yeah, from the web app or the mobile app?
From the web app or the mobile app. Okay.
Yeah.
And something that I saw, we were talking about ERP systems, is that in some ERPs, they would, for instance, create a project and tasks that can have a timesheet component from a sales order. So let's say you've got a sales order, you just send a sales order that you transform into an invoice to a client, and then you've got your team working hours against the sales order. Because you're not an accounting app, so you don't have all the invoicing, sales order quotations, sales order, the invoicing part inside of Zelt. How do you interface or integrate with an accounting app for this type of requirement? So if someone wants to connect the timesheet with a sales order, for instance.
Yeah, so when people track their time, so if you remember here, you can set up different tracking. We call it jobs, but basically you can set up these jobs, and there could be client names or project names or cost centers, or just define what they do. So office work, for example. And then you can plan people time in advance. So you can say, hey, Chris this week is working for client A, for example, and Sam's working for client B. And you can then report on it. So here, I think I have one maybe set up somewhere. Let's see, timesheets. Timesheet by job here, for example. There's probably some filter on it. Right. This month, maybe let's remove this. Yeah, so you can see here, so our reporting is pretty powerful and super flexible. So you can see here, I've added to this report the job name of all the timesheets that exist, and I've aggregated here. I've aggregated the length. I could remove the length here. For example, maybe add the name of the person. So you can see here, these are all the timesheets that were submitted by different people across all time. You could filter this, so I can say, for example, only show the ones from this month or this quarter or whatever, and you can then aggregate it. So let me just add back the aggregation here. Total. So you can see here, for example, client A has a total of 198 hours. So you could now use this, for example, to bill your client for these 198 hours. I don't know, create an invoice in the invoice system, and so this will be input of your invoicing if you're invoicing people by whatever hours you deployed your stuff.
But do you have a kind of built-in trigger integrations with some accounting software, or would it be like, I know it's 198 hours, so then I will create my invoice in, let's say, Xero or QuickBooks or whatever? Or is it something that you have in an integrated flow through the API?
No, I mean, usually, our customers are usually bigger, so they wouldn't use Xero or QuickBooks. They would have Microsoft Business Central or NetSuite or something, or Sage. So usually this would be like custom integrations, and they can build it themselves, or they can pay us to do it. But basically, these are usually custom requirements, and so it's kind of up to them whether they want to do it manually or build these things you can export also by API, and you can build your own API integration. It's kind of up to you. The most important thing is that the data is there, and then you can put it in whatever system you need it.
So you've got the API, which would have access to that type of granular view. So I can pull the data and say, show me the breakdown of the timesheets by this job name, and that's a piece of data you can get via the API also. Everything that you see is available through the API?
Yeah, so you can save this report. So I've already saved it. It's called timesheet by job. And then you can, this report has the ID 627. So you can pull the data for report 627 by API, and then it's just in JSON format, and you can put it into your NetSuite API, for example. And there'll probably be some custom logic, right? Because we don't know who client A is. It has a name, but there's probably going to be some other stuff. So then you can use that for however your invoicing process works.
Yeah, so you can map it the way you want. And is it something that you frequently requested to do, or to explain how to do? Do people go to being so demanding, I would say, with you, or not really?
They want everything, and then we quote them, and then it becomes clear what actually is valuable to them.
Okay, they would
It's
like
valuable.
the super coffee machine, but then
Yeah,
they can do
and
with less in the real world.
you know how much the coffee machines in real coffee shops cost, right? They're like
Yeah.
50,000 pounds. So
Hmm.
of course, everybody needs it and wants it, but then if you actually have to pay 50,000 pounds for it, you just buy the Nespresso, right? So it's a bit like this. Everything's possible. Everything can be done. It's all a question of how much are you willing to pay for it? How much time does it cost to build? And sometimes if it's a one end of the month export, right? I mean, it takes literally like 5 seconds to go in here, export it, upload it. Sometimes it's just not worth it. Much more important is that the day-to-day stuff is automated, because if that's not automated, like for example, just being able to go in here and just click this very quickly, and just quickly it's putting in the hours here very quickly, right? If this isn't easy and automated, people just don't do it. And that means your data is wrong, and whatever automation you build just doesn't work because people don't do it. So
Yeah.
what we've seen more value is like automate the day-to-day interactions of people so that the data is there in real time, and then doing a month-end export, frankly, it's probably not worth the integration, because maybe you switch your accounting system anyway next year, or the APIs change, and it's not that big of a deal typically to do
Yeah,
a
yeah.
accounting
But
export.
at least, I mean, as you said, if you can also have the API access to the report and stuff like that,
Yeah.
they can just do whatever they want. Okay, so
Much more annoying is to get this thing into this particular format, right? If you don't have the data that lets you do it, or you need to now do a custom pivot table in your Excel file, and that's when things kind of become annoying, because now you have to keep versioning of that Excel file, and you have to teach people how to use that Excel file. While last here, the job is this report is predefined, and you can schedule it to be sent at the end of the month, for example, so you don't forget it either. Yeah, so let's maybe skip growth for now. We come back to that. Maybe to
okay.
money, because this is a good bridge. So if you look here, for example, I've set up 3 different payrolls here, 2 here in the UK, 1 in Saudi Arabia. You'll see here, let me delete this payroll again, actually. So there will be at least one person that I think is an hourly rate. Yes, for example, Anastasia here, because she's an hourly worker. So this value here actually is pulled real time from those timesheets. This is pulled here from an employee record. And when you now start a pay run, it'll actually pull all the relevant information that actually is required for actually producing the full payslip. That includes hours worked. You can set up any overtime rules, weekend time rules, or public holiday rules. So Anastasia, for example, you can see that each of the different jobs is now calculated separately, right? And you can see here actually that for overtime she's paid 18 pounds, while for office work she was paid 15, right? So in the jobs, if you remember these jobs, there's more metadata. But it's not just a string. It actually says, okay, this job belongs to this pay code, and there's a multiplier, and you can add overtime rules. So if, let's say, you work on the weekends, you get another 1.2x. And this is why here actually you get paid extra for these 64 hours. And particularly in companies where you have hourly workers or unions or these kind of rules, people spend multiple days every month just basically calculating these 3 lines for all the different people. So this can be fully automated with the timesheet to payroll integration. And then there's other stuff. So for example, you can see here somebody had an expense. Me, for example, here, right? Let's see on my payslip. I have lots of stuff here. So I have a bonus that was added by someone, and a commission, and my payslip is also broken down. And I also have here some expenses at the end. You do expense reimbursements, and that's an integrated payroll as well. You can set up your benefits, for example. So I have a pension contribution here, which is one of my benefits with self-pay. And you can also integrate your different leave policies to say, okay, let's say you get 20-day holidays. Let's say you go over that, what should happen? One of those rules could be, hey, deduct this from pay. So this results in a fully automated payroll for lots of our clients.
And regarding the payment part, then does it take place via the app, or do you interface with something for that?
We have a bunch of interfaces. So, for example, when you process payroll, it basically creates payment instructions. They sit in here. And let me just process one here. So we have a bunch of payments. So let's say I finished my March payroll. I can just go through here. There's a bunch of summaries here. I can process it. This basically finalizes your payroll, creates pay slips, syncs to accounting system. We do have interfaces with Xero and QuickBooks, by the way, but if you want anything more customized from the accounting journal perspective, then you probably want to customize that. And then now that I've processed the payroll, you'll see here now I have payments that are in pending state in my payments app. And then there's different ways how you can pay it. A lot of our customers have their own banks and they don't want to use our interfaces, or they use some really old school banks, so they just do BACS or whatever. But also, let's say you have let's say Revolut or something, you can just go here and we interface with a lot of different banks, and it'll just then send it to your bank account. You can log in and it will then handle bank account instructions.
It will manage, if you've got like 15 or 20 lines, it will just manage the individual payments through Revolut and do all the payments for you individually.
So when I now log in, there'll be a screen that will say, hey, do you want to make these 2 payments? Because I selected 2. Click OK, and then it will make 20 faster payments from your account. If it was 100 payments, it will make 100 payments. And at the end, it will route you back to Zelt. So this screen here is currently waiting for feedback. Once you completed this flow, this page will update and will either say success, or if you don't have funds or you made some mistake or said cancel, this it will say, error or whatever, and then that will update here the status. So this one's now question mark because I left, but you can see here, right? You can mark them as pay if you pay them manually, or if you use the actual flow that I used just now, it will say paid, and it will tell you. So there's different states how you can track what actually happened to the payment.
Do you have a lot of different localizations for payroll, or are you still very UK centric at the moment for payroll?
So just in terms of, let's say, our business, so revenue is around 60% UK and 40% international. And a lot of our international customers are running payroll with us, so including in the Middle East, for example, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar. In Asia, we have a number of customers like Hong Kong, Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, Sri Lanka. We're talking to people in India and Pakistan. And then in LATAM, we have a customer in Mexico, Colombia. So it's pretty spread. Obviously, there are lots of countries. We don't cover quite all of them. And it depends because different countries have different requirements. But our payroll engine is, by default, it's global, i.e. there's actually no specific customization for any country. A country is just a set of configurations. That also means if a customer tells us, hey, let's say we cover 3 countries already and then we want a 4th one, we can just add it as part of the implementation process, so they can basically cover all their payrolls inside the system.
But you already have systems in place to be fully compliant for payroll in Dubai, for instance, UAE.
Yeah, so for example, if I wanted to add UAE here, I just click new payroll. These are all the legal entities that I have set up in my account. So one of them is my Disney Dubai. So I can just set it up here. There's a bunch of settings you can do, but it's ready to go now. So I have now new payroll, Dubai. I have 2 people that are actually employed on my Dubai entity. You can add them. One of them is hourly, which has 0 hours so far. And this one here, so then you can just run it and it'll just make all your calculations here.
Let's say you would pay a contractor, so a full contractor. It will, I guess, also edit a document that you can then use in your accounting, as if it were the invoice claim from the contractor becoming an invoice from the contractor. You issue you can issue the invoice on behalf of the contractor through your system.
Yeah, that's right. So you can see here in the quick actions, as an employee, you can kind of log an expense, and if you are a contractor type, you may be part of invoicing policy. So if you are, you have the availability to raise an invoice. I am personally part of the product design invoicing policy here, which is why I have access to this. And then I can create my invoice here, right? It's basically a bunch of line items I can define which accounting codes can be used in this particular policy. So this one is contractors R&D, and I can say 100, and I can add multiple lines here. I can add a description. The invoice number is auto-generated, but let's say contractors have their own system. They can just update it here, 1, 2, 3. They can put their VAT settings here, and then there's a certain approval flow. And then once you've done that, it'll land here in the yeah, I'm now in the company view here. You can see all the invoices that have been
Yeah.
submitted. We have integrations with accounting systems so it automatically gets created as a bill. Yeah, once you approve it, it'll just create a payment here. So then you end up with a bunch of payroll and expense and invoice payments. Basically, at the payment stage, it doesn't matter anymore where they came from, right? Whether it's employee or contractor, it's just a payment, which you can make via your bank in whatever format works best for you.
Clear. Straightforward. Next part of the platform, coming back to growth. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the growth app here. So growth is for the softer parts of HR. So right, so in here you have like your data and you have documents and tasks and those kind of things. This is for time, and this here is for performance, engagements, goals. We're going to be adding a one-on-one app here as well. So this is, let's say, for the interactive bit of HR. So here, for example, you could run an annual review in here, which I have one. I have completed one here. So you can run it 360. So you can see, for example, here, Wilma was reviewed by herself and her manager, but then also Barbara was reviewed by one peer, and Anastasia was reviewed from the manager and herself, and two people that report into her. We call it upward, as well as two peers. And this is super flexible, so you can set up any questionnaire questions. We have lots of scales. You can make it anonymous. You can drill down here into responses, and you can benchmark people and can see how people respond on different questions. And I don't know, how does the self-review compare with the manager? Do they agree? Are they very different? Or how does the manager compare towards the peer, for example, right? To kind of see if this makes sense.
And that's maybe a good moment, then we don't have to do it later, to talk about how you see the evolution of HR. You also answered in the other interview that as far as AI is concerned, that's probably where you would see AI fit more than in the transactional part, because you can't make any mistakes. You can't have hallucinations for the numbers. But here you can, with AI, let's say, have something that tells you about the profile of someone based on what you get from the survey in a more consumable way than the cognitive load of trying to understand a graph, for instance.
Yes, exactly. So this is particularly relevant if, let's say, you have lots of peers, and in reality, you don't have time to really read through all of them. For example, we have here the notes section. So I could go in and I could add a note. Let's say I'm the manager and I want to add a note to the employee to kind of give them like a summary, right? Let's face it, you should probably be writing it yourself, but in reality, you kind of want to reflect what people say in any case. So this could be something where maybe the AI could use a draft and at least draft some part of the feedback, which is kind of summarizing what the peer said, for example, right? Or maybe the peer feedback is different to the self feedback, and point out those differences, and they can edit it. So, for example, we haven't added it here yet, but this would be a clear use case where it's useful. Similar would be, for example, here in surveys, where let's maybe go here. I have a good one. Post survey. There are 92 participants. We have customers with over 1,000 employees. So imagine there's 1,000, and let's say there's 15 questions on the survey, and there's 1,000 people. That's 15,000 responses. That's impossible, right? Like nobody has the time to go through that. So, of course, here the visual overview is super helpful. But then here, if you have 10,000 responses in here, this is where AI becomes really useful. And this is something where we're going to be spending some time this year to identify the biggest wins, to basically extract meaningful insights quickly, particularly when there's lots of data. And I think you very correctly pointed out, there isn't really a right or wrong, right? Basically, there's a bunch of opinions that people maybe point out, and things like word clouds or summaries that point out commonalities and where there's overlaps will be very helpful. So this is some stuff that we're going to be adding here, but it's always going to be a mix of hard analytics, so you can cross-check this. So for example, you can see here that apparently, when it comes to engagement, on average, females are, when it comes to engagement, are rating much lower, and people that have, joined recently, again, have an issue with engagement, leadership, management. So I think you always want to mix both, because you can't fully trust the AI anyway. But when it comes to summarizing, and sometimes you just have to put it in words, right? This is nice, but your board report will need you to write something down, for example, right? And turning this into just a paragraph of text is just really nice to have, because writing text is just really cumbersome, right?
And also, if you have
especially
a lot of unstructured data, AI is pretty good at finding the patterns in the unstructured data, which is very good use case. And you can also, the cool thing with AI is that you can transform to a certain extent unstructured data into structured data. So you can define a template with keys and values, with in a JSON, and you say, okay, take this unstructured data and give it to me in an output which is structured. So that's also a pretty cool use case these days.
Yeah, the other would be to just even set up a survey itself, right? So let's say you start up a survey here, and you have to add these questions, and let's say you haven't done this in Zelt before. Either you can use one of our question libraries, but let's say you already have a survey that you did previously in Google Forms or something. How do you set this up here, right? So this is basically, yes, you can set all this stuff up, but it's a lot of clicks, because there's a lot of parameters and there's a lot of settings, and
there you use AI. That's also what they did. For instance, in Drupal, they're using also AI as a kind of very narrow coding, in a way, assistant, where you want, for instance, a form which consists of 10 fields, but you know exactly how it's structured in your system, and then the AI would basically transform a prompt into a structured form using your own stack, in a way, if you know
exactly.
if you know what I mean. So that's also a cool use case. And I think you also mentioned this idea of when the employees have questions that are recurring questions about company policy, about anything that's related to how the company is working. Then you can obviously chat with the knowledge base.
Exactly, and this is working really well. So I have the bot here, for example, asking them. I can ask you, for example, try this absence. For example, I could ask it here. How does my holiday accrual work? And the AI will just explain it to you. This now basically saves the HR person, 25 minutes of explaining and writing down on email how it exactly works, which they probably have done already 15 times before. And in theory, the email is probably somewhere in their outbox somewhere, but the reality is they will not find it. So they'll just have to write it again. So we spend a lot of time just writing this down in a way that an AI can very easily digest it without unnecessary hallucinations, but also very important, so that there are no contradictions or confusing the AI. So if there's some very similar text, for example, sometimes, and it's not sufficiently differentiated, even just having good structure, so making sure that you have, let's say there's two very similar pieces of content, but one belongs to holidays and the other one belongs to surveys. I don't know, let's say the way the settings work is very similar. The AI could get confused if you don't have a very good structure in the way the knowledge base is built. So we spend a lot of time basically making sure that the knowledge base is very well structured and contains all information, so they can do this. And then our customers can do the same, so they can add their stuff here and their policies and stuff, so that the AI can explain to employees how their policies work, which again saves them a lot of time. Cool. Another great use case here is reports. So it looks very simple, and frankly, it is quite simple, but also there are so many different options and permutations. There are probably 300 fields in here that you can add. Add them in different variations. So if you remember, you can add things like aggregations or counts, or you can add all kinds of filters. Filters have lots of different options. You can combine or and filters. So this is not really something that the average HR administrative person may not be particularly comfortable with or familiar with. If you use maybe marketing systems before, they're quite complicated. You probably know how this works, but this is not necessarily easy, even though it's built in a very straightforward way. But again, this report, you can even see it here, how the URL is built. It's basically just a set of parameters, right? And again, we haven't built this just yet, but this is an obvious case where transforming AI prompt into a configuration which results in a chart is super helpful, because you can just say, hey, build me a chart that shows me the count of people by department last year, and it's basically just putting a bunch of settings into these 3 columns here, and it'll show you the data.
Yeah, the cool thing with AI, I think it's part also of the evolution, is that you won't need as many, I would say, ghost dead pages in an app. So before, you needed to pre-build all the screens that you wanted to have all the options possible to do this. Now you can manifest a graph based on a prompt. So if you've got a set of types of graphs and you structure the prompt and your data is properly structured to do it, you can manifest a screen on demand.
Yeah, that's right. You can probably reduce the real estate. And I think maybe one of the main points here is particularly why all-in-one is so powerful, and why our approach actually when it comes to AI is the much better one versus the best of breed one, is that you mentioned before AI is very good in finding patterns in unstructured data. That is true, but also AI is very good at making up data that actually doesn't exist or picking the wrong one, because I think AI oftentimes it's more important to it that it has an answer rather than having the right answer. So for example, here in reports, what an HR person would never do is drag in a bunch of PDF documents of contracts and tell them what's the headcount, right? There will be a number that probably comes out of it, but you could never trust it. What does work is you have a database that you trust that is accurate because you kept it and you have controls over it and you know what's in it, and then letting the UI parameterize a prompt or a report that you could have generated yourself, right? So it's repeatable, and it's the same thing as if you did it yourself, and it spits out data, because this data now you can trust 100%. It does exactly what these filters are built to do. They're 100% reproducible, and this is now data you can trust, even if the report was generated by an AI by form of parameterizing the filters and the columns. You would not trust this if this was generated directly from the unstructured data.
That's what we call also schema introspection. So if you've got a very good, well-structured database with the tables, self-explanatory, then the first thing you do is that you run a schema introspection, so that the system knows about the structure of the data, and then what can be done is that basically you transform the schema introspection into a JSON, and you render the JSON. That's usually the first step in the most advanced tools, like even I think Retool does it. For instance, Retool, the first thing they do is schema introspection, and they will suggest a UI based on the structure of the Postgres database. Because they can figure out, okay, that's what could be shown based on the schema of the database. But you can put it one step further and say you never really need to have a static UI. You can manifest the UI based on the JSON, which is based on the schema introspection. As long as the data is properly structured, you can do something like this. So then the product iteration is much faster, because the more you invest into your data structure, the faster you can ship the screens, basically.
And if your front end is parameterized, right? Because if you have hard-coded fields, then it doesn't work. But if you say this is it, basically you could teach it to build a front end based on just using components, and then just inject labels, for example, and data types into the input fields. I think looking at front ends, when I look around, I think very few front ends are actually built like this. Obviously, Retool being an embeddable kind of analytics suite probably is built by design. I think a lot of companies will need to refactor the entire front end for this to work. In mobile apps, it doesn't work either, because mobile apps aren't built like this. But in React, it would work very well. And I think maybe one other point to mention, you mentioned, the database schema and then letting the AI basically interpret it. That kind of becomes more powerful if you actually have more data in that one database. Because if, let's say, one set of data is hosted in a different database, in a different data center, your AI doesn't have access to that, right? And that means, for example, you couldn't now, for example, correlate survey results with compensation details, right? Once you have those two things in a database, you can find correlations and patterns. So that's the power of even why having maybe your payroll and your surveys in the same tool, which at first sight could be maybe, they don't really need to be, but there's correlation, right? People may, if you want to understand churn, engagement in taking part in a survey and how we did in the last performance review, and when you were last promoted, or how is your salary compare against your peers, these are not independent of each other. They're actually highly dependent.
If I were to, maybe too old to do that maybe, but if I were to start a new ERP startup project, I would create a headless ERP and focus 99% of my energy on the data structure. And so instead, of building the gas factory on top of it and the intermediate business logic, I would focus on the effort, all of the efforts on the data structure, because with the technology that we have today, as you said, the more data you have, the more structured and interdependent it is, the better the AI can do the schema introspection.
Yeah.
And then the front end, it's just, can be a chat, can be a graph, can be an input field which is manifested on demand. Because, for instance, if you do a schema introspection and you see in the table that there is a field that is a good candidate for an input, then you can manifest an input button. If it's a media, then it can be a media input. If it's a text, it's a text input, this kind of thing. So you can, there's one company I saw which kind of struggled for a few months, but then I think they found their way now from YC, called Taylor. They call themselves headless ERP. They still do a lot of stuff on the front end side. But I like this concept of headless, and it brings us to this comparison between what is modular and what is composable. I mean, modular, it's something with a lot of modules, and you have the modules interconnected, and it flows between the modules, a bit like Odoo, what I said before. Composable, it's more something that can very easily communicate with other solutions to APIs, with a common language and an open API standard between the system. And yeah, I think in your case, because also of when you started, you're modular, but at the same time you're very composable because of the way you've structured your data and the fact that everything is accessible via the API. So yeah, you're part of this generation which is both modular and composable to a certain extent.
Yeah, I would say it probably depends on the kind of market that you're in. So if you look at, let's say, engineering products, I probably agree that headless and API first is probably the way to go. I think when you look at our markets, integrations have failed. Actually, that it's not working. If you look at Bamboo HR, for example, one of the most adopted HR tools on the planet, they have like 4 payroll system integrations, right? And there are probably 400, maybe 1,000 different payroll tools out there. That tells you that the vast majority of HR and payroll system combinations don't even have an integration. Most of this don't even have an API, certainly not for the type of data, let's say the breadth of data you need to do to actually automate it. Also, the problem is oftentimes it's not a clear what is slave and what is master. Sometimes it could switch around depending on the situation. So in this market, composable headless kind of doesn't work. But I think in other markets, it probably does. And I think when it comes to AI, I think we're still early in a way that people, all-in-one is a trend that people are consolidating. But at the moment, for a different reason, they're not thinking, okay, this is going to be the underlying basis to be really AI ready, but it is. They're doing it because they're annoyed of dealing with all these tools, and it is annoying, right? Because if you have 8 tools, you have to enter the data 8 times. But really, if you look one thing ahead, it's really to get, if you want to have any sort of real impact with AI, you need to get your data in a system or in a place where you can actually leverage it, right? And see, if you have 10,000 employees, being able to see any patterns in a survey, it's almost impossible without an AI. If you want to then correlate that with other parts of with payroll or their performance reviews, or maybe even how often they log in, or how long they take to approve time off, right? That's kind of impossible. I think we're not quite there yet. People don't think like this yet, but I think you're right. If you really want to do actual AI applied to data and find patterns, right, it's got to be in a form and shape in a database where it's actually accessible. Right now, 99% of companies, that's not the case.
Yeah, for many people, the database, the data model, which is under the hood, is still a pure black box. They know there's something there. They know it sits on a server, but they don't really know how it's structured, how it was done. Is it Mongo? Is it Postgres? It is still MySQL or whatever. And the cool thing with this AI era that we live is that now it kind of becomes more important in a way to know what's under the hood, to know how it's structured, and to know how we can use it. So that makes, for instance, for a company like Superbase super interesting, because Superbase they are like an interface on top of Postgres, but now you see Superbase being used by many people as a source of truth for the data, and then they can build a product on top of Superbase. So I think that we will see probably a new breed of products. People will focus on the interpretation layer, and people like Superbase, I think, will have a very, very important role to play in the AI space. So it will be exciting. I'm a bit too old to be a young founder, but you're much younger than me, so you're still in the early days of the journey. Anything else that you would like to show us? We've already talked a lot, and I must say congratulations for the product. I mean, I'm a product guy, so I can say it's pretty well done. What's next on the roadmap for you? Scaling the sales and marketing efforts?
So obviously on the product side, we're always building. So I think that's probably also never ending. On the sales and marketing side, it's still pretty early for us. So we're now in year 5, but really the first 2 years of the products was really MVP. And then the latter 2 was really more like maturizing, making more ready for larger companies. As I mentioned, our biggest customer is now in the thousands employees, but they're companies with 100,000 employees, right? That is a huge difference. So I think that's a constant journey. On the sales and marketing side, we're only now really starting to focus more on the companies with many hundred or several thousand employees. We have our first few salespeople that joined the team recently. So previously it was all like word of mouth and like network and me doing a little bit of emailing here and there. So we're kind of professionalizing our sales and marketing at the moment. And you'll definitely hear more from us on conferences and events and those kind of things.
And you recently raised a new round, if I'm right.
Yeah, we raised a little bit of money, so we're super capital efficient. So we do apply a lot of AI in our own operations. So like we actually built our own AI SDR in house. I know there are a lot of like hype tools out there now.
Nice.
But we started building this like 3 years ago.
I'd like to see that. I mean, it's not a public product, but I would be interested to see that. Yeah.
Everyone wants to see that.
No, I have a chat. I think it's on Friday with one of those guys, Agent Frank. It looks good. It's Salesforge. It's called the company. He seems to be one of the most credible ones, I would say. Yeah. I saw that, the other guys in the space raised a lot of money. I mean, I saw Personio, 200 million Series E, then a Rippling last round, 200 million, deal 425 million Series D. So you're really capital efficient at the moment. But is it your plan to go to a big round for the next one?
So the next one probably will be the bigger one. So then, like right now, we're building out the sales and marketing teams, which is really kind of 0 to 1 for us. So obviously, once that is in place, the 0 to 1 from product was quite some time ago, but that is now maturing and growing. On the sales and marketing organization, we're kind of going 0 to 1. Once those 2 things in place, these are like the main building blocks, right? You build and you sell. So once those are there, then it's really about like growing much faster and putting some fuel on the fire. Then I think it probably won't be 200 million, but something meaningful.
Wish you the best. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you found the conversation interesting and challenging maybe at some point. So we can find you on Zelt.app. Am I right? Yes, that's the That's the website. If you want to join Zelt, there are a few openings at the moment. I saw that one of them was founder associate on the marketing side. We're talking about marketing. Is it still open?
We kind of have that role always open, just because there's very interesting candidates always coming in. I think we always want to talk to smart people, and we're always growing, right? So there's always going to be a position somewhere, whether it's founder associate or marketing or somewhere else. So definitely feel free to reach out if that's something that you're interested in.
And I discovered you actually because you were part of the 10 fastest growing startup in the UK, according to Sifted. So congratulations for
Yeah, thank
UK
you.
and Ireland in 2025. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time. Go to Zelt.app to discover the product. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to meet you all.